Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Asian Leaders Alliance, Asian Business League, and NAP San Francisco, our professional development series. I'm Keith Koo. I will be moderating our program tonight. I am on the board of the Asian Business League, and I have a radio show and a podcast, Silicon Valley Insider. Our special guest tonight is Darlene Chiu Bryant, who's the Executive Director of GlobalSF. Hi, Darlene.
Hi.
And we'll be talking about transitions, especially navigating career transitions during a pandemic. You can ask questions. We have moderators. If you go into chat, you can either put your question to everyone in chat, or you can go to Ramon Tran Tang, who is online. And also, if you're on Facebook Live, you can also submit questions, and we have them collected. And so tonight's event will be in a fireside chat format. We'll get to know Darlene. We have some questions to ask for her. And then there'll be a half an hour of Q&A from the audience. So feel free to have your questions entered ahead of time. And then we're going to do a half an hour. For those of you who haven't joined us before, we do a half an hour of open networking from 6:30 to 7 p.m. So we hope you stay for that. So with that, we're going to get started. So Darlene, thanks again for being here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to chat with you all to talk about career transitions. I'm actually really excited to share my story. I know Mabel's heard a lot from me about, what to do about careers. And I think to start, probably the first thing I should do is probably talk about what my experience has been in terms of, career. What did I start off with, and how did I get to where I am today? First of all, for those of you who know me or don't know me, I am the founder and executive director of GlobalSF. I do economic development in the international space, starting with a public-private partnership with the city and county of San Francisco. That being said, you're probably wondering, how the heck did I get here? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share, how I started. What was it like for me with my first job? And I will say that my first job was probably working for my parents, starting when I was 10 years old. I was working in their store, retail store. And almost any and every single Chinese American that I know who had parents running a small business, they were always in the business, right? Doing something, running errands, and typically starting at the age of 10. However, I remember my first paid job was when I was in college. And I actually was able to get a gig, I will call it, working as an interpreter in the pediatric clinic at the University of the Pacific in San Francisco, which used to be on Sacramento Street in Pac Heights. That being said, I majored in accounting and marketing. I graduated from USF, and I was expected to take on and run the family business with my dad. Clearly, I didn't like it. I took off. I left the United States, and I actually moved to Hong Kong. I stayed in Hong Kong for 10 years. I say I got married and I stayed there. And I started my real professional career there working in pharmaceuticals. What did I do? I tell people I sold drugs. However, I will say that what I did do was I was working in what I call the generic world. We imported or exported pharmaceuticals in bulk, literally white powder in 50 kilo drums. At one point, I was known as the penicillin queen, but I worked for 4 different companies. I worked from being vitamins, pharmaceutical trader, to being an FDA consultant, to looking at M&A consultant, M&A work as well, right? We were looking at vitamin E and possibly acquiring vitamin E production facility and exporting it from China. So those were the things that I did in the first 10 years of my real, professional career. Coming back to the US, I can say that it was tough. I was a general manager when I left Hong Kong. And so I was at the top of my career. Everybody in the industry knew me, right? And I come back to the United States, and when you're in your early 30s, people look at you and say, general manager, aren't you a bit too young for that? And I have to say it was really hard for me to find a real job or at the level, right? I was actually in the first couple of years when I first came back, one of the things that I thought I was going to do was go back to school and become an attorney. When I realized how much it cost, and I was a single mom with 2 kids, it's like, this is not feasible, not going to do it. And during that time, I can say I was a paralegal. I was a property manager. I was actually became a court certified interpreter. I flew out to Little Rock, Arkansas, of all places, and got paid $1,000 a day to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office to be a court interpreter. That was really kind of cool. And one thing I remember doing was to get reacquainted with the community that I had left for 10 years. I thought I would get back into it by getting into politics, and I became a political consultant. Worked on a number of campaigns, successful campaigns, did lose one campaign, but otherwise I ended up working the last paid, I shouldn't say the last paid, and so I ended up working for on the Gavin Newsom campaign when he first was running for mayor. And I remember by that time I said, you know what, I'm tired of campaign work, tired of being a consultant, tired of starting things and moving on. And I just wanted a full-time job so that I could spend time, normal working hours, know what time I go to work, know what time I get off work, and know when I'm going to spend time with my kids at home because they were pretty young at the time. So I remember getting offered a position. Hey, why don't you become, work for Gavin Newsom and work in his communications office? And I said, no, I don't want that job. I just want to work in the office somewhere, administrative work. So I start work at 8:30, get off at 5 and go home. And my girlfriend said to me, and you do have to listen to your friends sometime, Darlene, take that job. I'm going to bitch slap you if you don't. Okay. So I took the job. I was there for 2 years, no, 3 years, sorry. I worked for Gavin for 3 years, saw the whole same-sex marriage come to life and become a reality. Learned a lot. I had my own TV show, believe it or not. And I was actually the second highest ranking Asian American in the Newsom administration, believe it or not. And and I'm going to age myself, back in 2005, that was a big deal because when you think about it, the Newsom administration was actually, and I'll say it in this group, pretty white. Okay. Um, uh, Entitled white boys was kind of the way that we kind of described it at the time. So that being said, I left, I left the administration, and I went to the dark side and I joined PG&E. I tell people, and I did corporate communications there. And then after 3 years, and I'm going to share here, people don't know, I did get let go. However, I saw the writing on the wall and I started looking for another job. So I finally, I did leave PG&E. I did go work for a bank. People think that I transitioned. I actually got let go. I got paid a severance, but before I got that, I actually found another job and I went to work for United Commercial Bank. And I became there, and I went in there to do communications as well. 9 months into that job, East West Bank took over the bank, and I no longer did communications and I did community affairs. I said, sure. My boss asked me, he goes, are you ready for a change? I said, absolutely. I'm here thinking, I've done this work, community affairs, for the longest time. I mean, that's what, political consulting work is all about, right? That's what campaign work is all about. So for me to have that title professionally on my resume was fine by me. So I did corporate, I did government relations for a while, over 2 years, got bored working for a bank. And I decided, I got to do something else. And Ed Lee was running for mayor. So I said, I'm going to go ahead, Ed, and get him elected. And I did, and we won. I was actually the deputy finance director. So I did fundraising, nothing to do with anything I had been doing to date, right? Did fundraising for him. And then after he became mayor, he said, why don't you help me run ChinaSF? And I was going, why the heck do I want to run a nonprofit and do more fundraising? However, I did think back to when I was working for Gavin Newsom. On Gavin's first trip to China, I actually staffed him. And when he did come back from China, he says, you know what, there's so much going on in China. It was really his first trip to China, and he was totally surprised that it was not a developing country, that it was already so advanced. And then he came back to San Francisco. He says, I'm going to start a China desk, set aside $2.1 million. That was in 2005, November. And I said, I'll believe it when I see it. 3 years later, they did start the initiative. I said, I don't want the job. And because I was already at PG&E. And now Ed is offering me this job, right? And I said, okay, I have no excuse. So I took on the job, and um, I've been doing economic development for the city of San Francisco since 2012. I will say that that job was a culmination of every single thing I had ever done in my life, and I'm still doing it to this very day. So it's all of it. It included communications, included public relations, it included government affairs, it included business development, it included even, all the regulatory work, right, that goes with FDA. I'm doing a bit of that too, because I'm working with the government and government agencies. So the job was a little bit of everything until that point. And today, as founder, because as founder of GlobalSF, I've taken it to another level where I not only get to continue doing what I've been doing since I joined ChinaSF, but I actually get to grow the organization with a vision that is mine. And it's been very, very rewarding. So, with a lot of challenges along the way, of course, but that's part of self growth. And with that, I'm open to questions and we can start our conversation. Was that okay, Keith?
No, that was great, Darlene. And I think it's an amazing journey. And I think it really speaks to folks that feel like they get locked into a career path. So you go to college, traditional, we'll make it like in terms of Asian, typical, you've got a career path laid out for you, whether it's your own or your parents, and you felt that you're on this, you get on this track, you have to stay on this track, and you're clearly not following a linear career. But I think the lesson from that is that no matter where you end up, every experience you obtain is relevant, and
Yeah.
you don't have to stick to a path. You can actually find out that you don't like doing certain things, or sometimes, like you said, you experience a layoff, that there are other transferable skills. And so as a reminder to the audience, feel free to drop questions in chat. If you want to do it privately, reach out to Ramon. And if you are on Facebook Live, feel free to put that in the chat as well. But we're just going to have a conversation with Darlene. And the first question, especially that we're been in lockdown 7 months, there have been all different types of job actions. Let's start first with people who are facing a job loss due specifically to COVID-19. What are your thoughts on that? And what are some of your advice for people in that situation?
I would say, first of all, treasure the time that you have. Don't consider it as, oh my God, woe is me. Oh my God, this is the worst time of my life. I would say use that as an opportunity to, one, say hello to every single person you wanted to say hi to in the last 2 years when you were really, really busy and didn't get a chance to. You will not believe what is going on. You will not believe the information you're able to, absorb and learn. And you know what? You may find out that there's going to be a job opportunity by just doing that alone. But I would say, you know, do not. I mean, I know I'm really sorry, and I'm sorry that you did get laid off. But you know what? That happens at least to everyone once in their lifetime. It's okay. It's okay. But you know what? This too will pass. And again, take advantage of this opportunity. One, say hello to everybody that you haven't said to in a while. And two, you know what? If there's a lot of stuff at home that you wanted to do and you didn't get a chance to do, use this opportunity to do it. Because if you have a clean house, if you have a clean slate, I'm telling you, it's going to make your mind so much more clear. It's going to be so much easier to move on and figure out what you want to do next. Seriously, even in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah, that's great advice. And really, as we're doing right now in this group, networking is very powerful. I think somewhere between, depending on which statistics you follow, something between 70 and 85% of all professional jobs are found through a connection or a connection to a connection. So I really do encourage people to network as you suggested, Darlene. Here's an interesting question: is there are people who didn't get laid off but are finding opportunities in COVID-19. I think some of them are a little pensive about whether they should make a career change in the middle of a pandemic. So what are your thoughts on whether you should or should not make a proactive career move?
I don't know if that's called proactive, but the thing is that I would say opportunity is an opportunity is an opportunity. If you are not going to uh, regret not taking the opportunity, right? Okay, don't take it. However, I would say that if it's an opportunity for you to, one, learn more, it makes your resume look better. You get to, face a new challenge and the company is solid and they really want you. what better than taking on an opportunity where the company really wants you to join them, right? I'd say go for it. I know we're in the middle of a COVID, but a pandemic. However, what I will say is some companies are really, really growing. Like I am actually currently hiring, by the way. I have 2 positions open. However, that being said, companies and organizations are growing. Some are, yeah, and a lot, and for sure, every single company I know is kind of restructuring, but they're doing a reset. Everyone is doing a reset, whether it's because of revenue, whether it's because of business model. But I can tell you across the board, everybody's doing a reset. And if out of that reset, new opportunities are coming up, it is so that the company can be resilient and be able to do what they need to do post COVID or with the new economy, where I'm calling it a new economy, right? So if that company is offering you a position, take it on. Seriously. I don't think you're going to regret it.
Great advice. And speaking of resets, I can think of a few situations I've heard of that are actually very relevant. One would be relocation. So companies like Facebook have announced that over 50% or 50% of their hires going forward will be out of the state of California. And there's a lot of, especially in the tech industry, talking about relocating to other parts of the country. So one, what are your thoughts on relocation? And two, following up with that, is in a lot of, I'm used to it from the corporations I've been a part of, but the reinstitution or the institution of salary differentials that people are not used to. So one is, should I relocate? And two is, should I accept a pay cut? And the pay cut could be either where you're at today or it's tied with the relocation.
First of all, my belief is if you ever get an opportunity to move somewhere for work that you would never have ever thought of going to before in the first place, take that opportunity because it's a learning opportunity, right? One, especially if it's overseas, I'd say absolutely go for it. Now, two, if you are thinking about, hey, am I going to move? It's going to be a good opportunity. I don't have to report to work. I don't have to go in the office. I'd say think twice about it because there is always this belief where out of sight, out of mind. So if there's an opportunity for example, moving up the corporate ladder, and because you were not around, your boss didn't think about you, or the team lead didn't think about you because they didn't see you, that's a bad sign, right? But that being said, if you are being asked to relocate so that you can take on a new challenge, and even if that does come with a pay cut because you're no longer living in the Bay Area, but however, if you do have an opportunity where you can take on bigger responsibility, you get to really report up to the big boss, I'd say do it for sure. Because it'll pay back in spades later on. Because if you do come back, you'll get a bigger pay raise and then you can afford everything else. And by then, property prices may adjust a little bit and you can afford a house. I'm just saying.
So that's really good advice, especially if you can report to the big boss. So then what are your thoughts about permanent remote work versus relocation work? So now you are working remotely on a permanent basis.
I actually am not a big fan of that. I've never really been a big fan of that. I understand that, in many ways it's easier to work remotely now because, you don't have to, first of all, dress up and spend that much money on clothes. So yes, your expenses have gone down. Second of all, you
just pants. You don't need to spend much money on pants.
Okay, TMI, but okay.
I wear jeans, yeah. So it's fine.
Okay. And then the second thing is that people just roll out of bed, right? Some people don't even brush their teeth and you can start working. I don't know. For me, I like just doing something to feel like there is a change or a line between being in your pajamas and being at work, right? And that being said, I think that there is always a good thing, something good coming out of being able to work together in the same space as your colleagues. The fact that there's a human interaction, right? The fact that you're able to interact, there's always something cool and innovative or creative that comes out of that, right? Whether they call it creative collision, right? And there's a reason why Silicon Valley and the whole Bay Area, where we are now, the reason why that San Francisco is so hot is because everybody has been able to work together in such a small space. I mean, 49 square miles, and in downtown, we're even smaller, right? For all the innovation that's been going on, it's only because we've been able to see each other, right? To make that permanent where we're all working from home, I don't know, quite frankly, I don't know how good that's going to be. And again, it also goes back to if I can work permanently remotely and eventually everybody else goes back to work and I'm going to request that I don't have to go into work, you know what? If anything good comes along, I'm going to be the last person to hear about it because I was not in the office to even know about it or to hear anybody talk about it. I won't hear the gossip. I won't hear any of the corporate like, hey, so and so, or is doing this, that, and the other, right? You don't get to see, the maybe the vice president secretary in the hallway to hear what's going on or see what hear what he's thinking about or she's thinking about, right? So I'm not a big fan of that. And I would say temporarily, yes, but permanently, not a good thing. Unless you're an insurance broker. That's totally different.
Just one anecdote. When I was at Cisco Systems and we were .com era, we were promoting remote work. That was our technology. We actually had people that could work anywhere. So Alaska, for instance. And when the downturn happened, we had our first major layoff. Who was the first person to go?
Remote.
Yeah, it's like, why do we have somebody in Alaska? And that's a true story. And so I think when anyone's weighing permanent remote work, the very first priority should be, if I work remotely on a permanent basis, how do I stay connected to my leadership and my team? And how can I be seen? Because if you're not seen, then you're out of sight, out of mind. And when it comes time to making difficult decisions, like who am I going to lay off? If you're not there, it's actually kind of it's hard thing to say, but it's actually an easier decision.
Right. So absolutely. I totally agree with that.
So then this leads to the next question, which is, let's say that you're fully gainfully employed during COVID-19, but you're just super unhappy in your situation and you don't necessarily have a place to land. You don't actually have something lined up. What should you do if you're in that situation?
Figure out why you're unhappy. Is it because of the pandemic and you're working from home and you are missing the social interaction? Or is it really because the job that's making you depressed, right? I think there's a lot of soul searching. Maybe there's some coaching you can get to find out what it is. Um, uh, and then if it really is the job, then I would say network, find out what's available out there, and even if you're not moving right away, at least tee it up where if something does open up, you can at least have a first bite at that opportunity. But the most important thing is, I would say, ask yourself and find out. And if this means peer coaching where you can, think out loud, talk out loud, and be able to assess why you're unhappy, figure that out first before you take the next step. Don't jump just because you're unhappy. That's a no-no, especially from a mother.
So when you were giving your background, you're talking about a lot of things that are happening to you and sometimes simultaneously. So they say what are the most stressful things in life? Dealing with a marriage, a divorce, buying a house, changing jobs, and dealing with the death of a loved one in a family, or a combination of that. So COVID-19 kind of already puts one of those things in there, which is this added stress. How many different stresses, or put it a different way, how much stress should you deal with in terms of transitioning while you have these other things going on? What's your philosophy or what's your approach to that?
My philosophy is, if you don't have to take on added stress, don't. If you have a lot going on in your life right now, deal and prioritize what you have to deal with now. Stress is not going to go away. That's a part of life. I'm sorry. I remember when, quite frankly, when I took on the role of ChinaSF, my dad passed away the day of my announcement. And it was Chinese New Year's Day. And we all know how auspicious that is. And you're not supposed to talk about death or anything negative on Chinese New Year's Day, right? My dad had passed away and I couldn't go into work that day. I could not meet the new staff, my staff, because I just started this job. And I had staff that had flown in from China because it was Chinese New Year, right? So they had come back to the U.S. for the holidays. I couldn't even meet them. So what do? You focus. It's like, okay, I have to take care of whatever's going on with my dad, but I have this new job. I'm going to take one day off to breathe, but let's focus, let's prioritize, and just, you know, um, get the job done. Uh, Seriously, learn to compartmentalize. Um, but that's a part of life. I mean, being a parent, for me, being a parent, being a single mom, having to juggle a job, find a job that would pay, you have your rent, you have your kids, you have the education. I had two boys, and they were going through ROTC. I mean, lots of stuff going on, but the only thing you can do is one, prioritize, do the best that you can do. Don't ever, and easier said than done, but don't ever look back and say, I could have done this better. You know what? You're doing the best that you can do. And as long as you're saying, I did the best that I can do, move on. Don't don't let anything hold you back, but just move on, prioritize, know that you're doing the best that you can do, and move on. But do not take on added stress. If you don't have to, don't take it on. Just prioritize, 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 prioritize.
And that's
And prioritize.
that's really good advice, especially tying it into really focusing on what you can control.
If you can't control it, don't worry about it. Right.
So what are some practical tips on you're in a job search, you're locked up at home. What's some practical tips on how you approach looking for a job?
Practical tips. One, don't let your boss know that you're looking. In many ways, don't even let your colleagues or peers know that you're looking, not at work anyway, right? Number one, start working on your resume. Know what your strengths are. Two, know what you like doing. Um, and have you even done a map of your career? Where do you want to be in 5 years, right? Or where do you want to be in 10 years? What is it going to take for you to get there in 10 years? What are some of the jobs, or what are some of the roles? What are some of the positions? What are some of the experiences you're going to need in order to get there? And then you start networking. I was told a long time ago, not that long ago, but it was a while ago, by a really good girlfriend of mine, where she said, don't ever surround yourself with negativity. And I'm going to say the same thing. When you are not happy on your job and you want to move on, think about what would make you happy. Think about why you're unhappy, and then clear it out, and then be able to focus. Once you're able to focus and you kind of have a clear palette, right, or a clear platform or plate or whatever you want to call it to work with, things will be very clear and things will come your way. Again, don't don't surround yourself with negativity. Think positive, and it really makes a big difference. It really makes a big difference.
So some other things I would offer in terms of searching, because we have technology now, set up job alerts on Google, set up on LinkedIn. You can do things on Indeed, but you can set up actual very specifics on the things you're looking for and just have it delivered in your box. And then back to the networking, whether you're using paid or free LinkedIn, you can always see who you're connected to and who they're connected to. Back to the comment we made earlier that the majority of jobs are found through connections.
And I'm going to reiterate that, because I think every single job I've had has been through connections. People would tell me, by the way, this position is open. Oh, by the way, I think you should apply for this job. Oh, by the way, they're looking for this person, so why don't you go apply? I'm serious. Almost every single job I've ever had in my life has been because of my network. Be nice. Be nice to people. They'll remember it and they'll help you.
And I also recommend networking with recruiters. Every industry has them. Find either a referral from somebody else who's used one, or find ones that are known to be very successful in what they do. And I mean, their job is to find you a job.
And
Well,
they
their
get
job
paid.
is to find the company that's hiring a job, but they're
Right.
they're basically an agent. And
Right.
so you should do that as well.
Right.
Here's a question. Would you accept an offer? So the setup is you're at an organization that may or may not have a layoff or an impending layoff, and now you have a job offer from another company. Would you accept the offer without knowing if the company that you might be leaving is going to offer you a severance package or not? Or should you just take the offer and not worry about whether or not the company you're at is going to have a layoff event?
First of all, does it really matter whether or not you get the severance? How much more money are you going to make? And is it worth the risk of losing the offer? I'd say if you get an offer, take it. Don't wait for the severance. It's not worth it. It really isn't. Don't wait.
I think going back to what Darlene said earlier, if it's something you like to do, if it's increased job scope, if it definitely broadens your experience, totally agree. You should go for it if there's nothing holding you back.
Absolutely.
Here's a question specifically around your fundraising expertise, is that it seems very difficult right now, especially with COVID, for organizations to fundraise. Have you figured out any formula for success?
First of all, from a nonprofit perspective, the target funders, first of all, you're not going to go to an airline and expect them to give you money, okay? Come on, it's all common sense. I would say from a fundraising perspective, I'm always looking at what makes sense. Does it make sense for them to sponsor me? And the thing is that, however, I also know that yes, it does make sense for them to sponsor me, but what levels will they be able to sponsor me at? And what are we doing? Is it going to warrant for them to give me the same amount, or is it going to be less? So I would say manage expectations. I will honestly say that at GlobalSF, we continue to fundraise. And I'm not saying that we have no problems, but I will say that we have lowered the levels of requests that we make, right? It's like instead of asking 25,000, we're asking 10. Instead of asking 10, we're asking 5. Instead of asking 5, we're asking for 1, because of what's going on, right? We want to be cognizant of, hey, everybody's getting pay cuts. I got a pay cut, right? And so for example, the law firms, the accounting firms who traditionally sponsor me, I know that a lot of them got literally 20% pay cuts, and they'll say, Darlene, we'll give you money. But I said, I understand. We'll talk about it and know that they are going to come in and sponsor us. It's just going to be 1 later, or 2 definitely at a lower level. So 1, be mindful, be considerate, and manage expectations if you're going to fundraise.
And as a follow-up, thank you for that. As a follow-up question to that is, since you're running a nonprofit that's global in nature, what are other trends you're seeing either here or domestically or around the world?
From what perspective?
Struggles, challenges, differences, and things that have happened before, specifically in the nonprofit sector.
So the nonprofit sector, it's interesting that my husband and I are both in the nonprofit world. He's the acting CEO of a nonprofit, and I am the founder or ED of a nonprofit. So we're actually sharing stories, and both of us also sit on different nonprofit boards, right? So we actually live and breathe nonprofits now, I feel like. That being said, worldwide, I would say that from a giving perspective, I think this is what we want to know. From a giving perspective, the trend is to move towards high net worth individuals, foundations, funds, government, and there is less coming from corporate. That is definitely the major trend that I'm seeing from a giving perspective.
Got it. What are your thoughts in terms of, do you have insight into what industries are stronger than others and what industries are suffering? And I can weigh in on that as well, but are you seeing trends in those areas?
Clearly tourism is tough. However, I will say that Domestic tourism is actually doing okay. RVs, I think if anybody owns a company or a dealership, that sells RVs or rents RVs, I mean, they are gonna be making a hell of a lot of money. So I would say that tourism, depending on what sector, part of it is doing okay, the other part is not, right? It's like the luxury hotels, they're gonna be challenged. However, people are starting to travel again. So it's working. I think definitely in the when it comes to food and beverage, restaurants, pop-ups are actually doing okay because they're being creative. They have lower overhead. They're not expecting to dine in. They're looking at to go, takeout, delivery. So the model has changed for F&B, and this is worldwide, by the way. We hear it in Indonesia, we hear it in Hong Kong, we hear it same in Singapore. So this is worldwide. It's not just in the Bay Area, and that's changing. Retail definitely has changed. Everybody is buying online, and even if you have a favorite, for example, department store or for us girls, we have someone who, we've been working with on the cosmetics front, right? They are really smart now and they contact you and say, hey, we have this sale going on. Can I orders for you and ship it to you? And everybody's doing that now. So there's a different, that everybody is going more virtual, right? I think that from economic development perspective, we're talking a lot about supply chain. Um, the trend is to buy more local and even local, hyper local, that I don't want anything shipped from way too far away. But if I can have something shipped to me from within, the 30, 45 miles within from where I'm living, and I'm seeing that trend too. And even from manufacturing, we're trying to what I call onshore or reshore manufacturing. And that is what a lot of people want to see. They want to see that product is being manufactured domestically now and not necessarily imported from overseas. So maybe I'm just rambling now, but those are the trends that I'm seeing.
No, I don't think you're rambling. I think it's all very timely. I can tell you that the work I do with one of my startups in the drone as a managed service, we were at a conference right before lockdown from NASA and their head of supply chain, and it was a call to action without naming the country that you know there was a call of action that at least in the aerospace industry for electric helicopters and drones that they want a certain country entirely out of the supply chain. But that's just really to your point that there is a big emphasis because COVID-19, and I think from a forget the country that we're talking about, but just the whole disruption of the supply chain, that for manufacturing, the reliance on any foreign country solely for what we say single source makes it really difficult. And so even if it's more expensive, if you can't build a product, then you don't have a product.
Right.
So I think that's really accurate. But also I think when my suggestion is if you're going through a job disruption due to an industry shift, so say traditional retail, tourism, travel, hospitality, um, those things is as you look for your next job, maybe you take your transferable skill set, but don't apply to the same industry, right?
Right.
And I remember the survey first came out in the first few months of lockdown that the top three industries for new hiring was government jobs, education, and technology. Technology jobs are always performing well. So if you target those industries, even if it's remote work, those would probably be your my suggestion is that's a good bet to kind of line yourself up with. So just be on top of what trends are out there, and it's easily searchable. So there are more questions coming in, and one is specifically to your public and private sector work.
Okay.
Because you've made those transitions, how have you been able to stay true to your multicultural identity? Since it's kind of like you were kind of being guided by the opportunity. So how do you actually do those, and how do you choose? What's your thought process in choosing the roles, and how does that align with your cultural identity?
Um, I'm thinking back to, I told my boys, you have to learn Chinese, and they didn't listen. It's like, anyway, I will say that I thank my mother for forcing me to learn Chinese. I thank my father for throwing a contract in my face and saying, translate it. And this is when I was in college, okay? I thanked them. I hated it when I had to do it, but I thanked them because you know what? Because I had that experience, I've been able to do well in every single job I was thrown into, I guess, right? Or I was able to take on, whether it be, doing community outreach for a campaign, whether it be working for BG&E and being their, Chinese spokesperson, or even for Gavin Newsom for that matter, right? I was his chief deputy, but my community was the Asian media, right? Um, uh, I thank my parents for that, making me do that. Okay. When it comes from an identity perspective, I will honestly say that and I'm going to talk about one experience I had, and that was when I was at PG&E. I was really torn because I was hired to be their spokesperson, right? Not for Asian American media per se. Okay. I was hired to be a spokesperson. I wasn't even a manager. I was just going to be one of their reps. And then also taking on, in addition to be the regional rep, right? I was in charge of San Francisco. I was also the rep for Asian American media. So I had a dual role. Um, and that was fine until I got promoted to be a manager. And that was when I was torn. It's like, and this is what I'll say. I was trying to do my job as a manager without the ethnicity part, being a part of it. And I remember my mentor saying to me, Darlene, you should really get involved with the ERG. So why the heck do I have time to, it's like, I don't have enough time doing my job. You want me to get involved with an ERG, right? And now I look back and I was going, that was really stupid. Why didn't I take, his advice and just go and get involved, even if I'm not doing anything, but just to be engaged, right? So that I can hear, so that I can be more involved and share. For the record, I love mentoring. Mabel will attest to that. I'm a big fan of mentoring and coaching, and my number one advice to every single person here, listening today is one: if you don't have a mentor, find a mentor. If you don't have a coach, be a coach. Find a coach. And if you are already like my age, I don't want to say how old I am, but if you already have some experience under your belt, feel free and find someone you like and start coaching and mentoring them. I think that we owe it to our next generation to actually do that. And so I really believe, I should have done that. So that was when I struggled, when I was trying to, think of, again, right? How do I juggle, right? What are priorities? Is this stressful? Yes. And my priority at the time was to do a good job, when I should have just said, you know what, screw this. I need to do a little bit of everything, and I can't just do one thing, right? I have to do a little bit of everything. So I'm out there, and I should have done that. Whereas I didn't, and I was just focused on the professional. And you know what? Whatever. Look what happened. Like, why did I spend that much time on it when I got laid off anyway? By the way, when I was at PG&E, for the record, they had the best rating ever, okay? After I left, it's gone downhill. Seriously, you can go back and check.
So they need to hire you back, right?
I don't want to go back. Hell no. No. Sorry.
The follow-up to the question we just had for you is very specific, because here you are, Asian American woman executive, working in a world, literally the question is, with Caucasian men. So how was that, and how did you navigate that? And that's a very specific to your experience.
Oh, can I share one story?
Of course.
I will share one story. When I was running ChinaSF, and at the time we were housed at the Chamber of Commerce. And clearly, when you think of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce or the Bay Area Council, you think of white men, old white men for that matter, right? I was in the midst of planning a fintech event. And this would be probably the first fintech event ever in the city of San Francisco. This was back in 2015 when I was planning it. We eventually had it in 2016. And then I had the CFO come to me and saying, Darlene, we can't do it. You don't have the money. You're losing money. And why are you doing it? And I said, are you kidding me? I've been talking about this for the last 6 months, and you're going to tell me now not to do it? I said, okay, fine. I'm short. I'm Chinese. I'm a woman. Nobody hears me. I'm serious. I threw that at his face and he had to shut up. That being said, um, I have learned to just make myself be heard. I have learned that communications is the most important thing. I have learned that, and Mabel is nodding her head because I tell her this all the time. It is not what you say, but how you say it and who you say it to. Everything you do, especially being Asian American, you have to be extremely strategic. And I stress strategic, not being loud, but how you say it, what you say, and who you say it to. Take advantage of the opportunity. Look for the opportunity. Make sure you're heard. But don't just be the loudmouth because you're going to be the crazy person. Okay, I hate to say, um, but be strategic. Look for the opportunity and make yourself heard. Seriously.
Great. A question about specifically your transition from the private sector to the public sector. So for those who've been affected with job loss or career transition, and they've not done public sector nonprofit before,
Okay.
what is your what do you want to pros and cons? What's your advice for what you need to consider, what you should have your eyes open to, and what are the things you like and don't like about it?
Um, Geez, I've been in all three different sectors. uh, First of all, nonprofits don't pay that much. However, if you're passionate about whatever that nonprofit is doing, you're gonna be happy doing and having that job, even if you're making less, because there's an impact that you're making and creating and part of. Um, and you know what? As a team, you can actually make more happen. You know, um, and it's actually worth it joining a nonprofit, just knowing that you are going to be making less money because nonprofits, we all have to fundraise and we're all struggling. Even though I will say that nonprofits are actually paying a lot more now than they used to. And it really depends what nonprofit you're joining, right? But nonprofits are paying more. But typically, generally speaking, they're lowest on the totem pole when it comes to salary. Okay. That being said, the difference between the public sector and the private sector, you will of course make a hell of a lot more money in the private sector. Um, there's going to be a lot of politics involved. Um, However, right? And you have to watch your back, and you're not going to know when you're going to get laid off. You don't know, what the boss is thinking or what the muckety mucks up there are going to do in terms of strategy for the company and whether or not it's going to impact you, because you don't know who has your back, who doesn't have your back. Basically, nobody has your back when you're in the private sector, right? Everybody's in for themselves. Um, in the public sector, what I'll say is you will be protected if you are civil service, period. If you are not civil service, you are at will, you can get laid off just as fast as if you were in the private sector. So difference is difference when you're working for government. You're civil service or you're not. For me, unfortunately, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm always given a job or learn about an opportunity because it was a referral. I'm always exempt. So for me, every single position I've ever had in government has been exempt. Therefore, I never made it to become a civil servant. Okay. Um, where you're a protected class. That being said, I will say that the government is really frustrating place to work for because you're dealing with bureaucracy. So if you're okay with bureaucracy, go and work for government. If you can't stand bureaucracy, don't even try, because I'm telling you, you're gonna walk out of there with a migraine or an ulcer or something, because it just you're gonna be driven nuts, honestly. So those are some of the things to think of when you are thinking, oh, do I want to go public, private, nonprofit? Um, However, I will say that absolutely, if you're one of those people, I just want to uh, I'm at this level where, hey, if I find a decent job, I can, make my mortgage, I can sock a little bit away, savings for retirement, whatever. Um, and you want to go, and it's okay to work for government because it's a 9 to 5 job or 8:30 to 5 job, right? It's stable. You get to work if you put in, say, like 15, 20 years and you can retire, you can start another career with your pension, start another career and build more, another pension, right? In the private sector or so, or in the nonprofit sector. So depending on where you are in your life, um, my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, it's good. I mean, you've experienced all three sectors, and I mean, you have good opinions and experience from that. This question, and I don't know if you have experience with this, I can answer it. It's people say that they have friends coming out of coding boot camps, and they're finding it hard to find a software development job because possibly because of the layoffs where other software engineers are being laid off. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't have any thoughts on that other than I know there's a lot of coding that's being done overseas as well. And
Yeah.
especially with this economy, when everybody's trying to watch the bottom line, a lot of the work is being, farmed overseas. So that being said, I'm sorry, it is tough, but I'm sure you have more to add, Keith.
Yeah, I would say certainly. I'll give you the 5 to 10 year outlook. I think that in general, most technology jobs that have to do with coding or software development will be automated in the next 5 or 10 years. I'm on a nonprofit called Humans for AI, and that's all about helping mid-career people who are in technology roles to not be obsolesced from the coming. So like the key about technology, you always have to keep your skills up. So yes, it will be hard to get a starter job if you're trying to, like, let's say, work for a Silicon Valley tech company. But there's all kinds of other companies that need technical software developers, other engineers. And so don't necessarily narrow your search to the Facebook, the Google, the Airbnb, the Uber, Cisco, what have you. Look at other companies. And then there's apprenticeship programs happening too. So the other side of it is you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree anymore to get a high paying technology job. Cybersecurity, the state of California has over, before lockdown, and I'm on a volunteer committee for the state of California. There's 70,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs. So even at 50,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs, get on the job experience, or if you can't get a job, go take classes in cybersecurity, get certifications, because this is something that's highly in demand. And it's not just technical. There's some behavioral analysis skill that's involved with that. And I'm just giving this as an example that you own your own job search. So think outside the box. Think about how you can get into a job that is definitely plentiful, and cybersecurity is one of them. And also, if you haven't thought of this yet, Google announced that they're doing their own, in essence, apprenticeship program. They're going to have 100,000 jobs filled in the next however many years. It's IT support, program project management, data science, and I forgot the third or fourth one, but those are things you can Google. They partner with community colleges, and again, you don't need a 4-year degree. You don't need a hardcore software degree. You can do the work, and Google pretty much guarantees if you follow their path, you'll get a job that pays between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. So
I will echo that because what I've seen, even my own nephew, right? Uh, I counseled him and I said, you know what? Don't wait for your $150,000 a year job, right? Just go and get a job, get some experience, and then get certified in another language or what have you. But once you have the experience, people will hire you for your experience. Move up the ladder that way. So totally echo what you're saying, Keith.
So Darlene, this is going to be our final question for the Q&A for tonight,
Okay.
but it really is perfect for you. So you seem like a very vibrant person. That's coming from the audience, full of life and a lot of life experience.
Thank
At
you.
what point are you able to make your hobbies and your passions into your career or a side hustle? How do you go through the thought process in that?
Oh my God, when you retire. I'm kidding. My husband laughs at me because I I was just telling you guys right about it, my experience. I think a lot of the girls in the audience know who Derek Lam is. Derek Lam and I grew up together. We're family friends, right? Our families were friends, and his sister and I were best friends growing up. Um, he went to design school, went to Parsons. My parents made me go to business school, and both of us were totally into fashion. He has become this well-known designer, right? That a lot of people know. And when I remember when he graduated, he came back to San Francisco. He says, "Darlene, look at what I did. Could you imagine what you would be doing if you had gone through the process yourself?" And I was going, "Don't rub it in." But that being said, it's okay. I think that I have a lot of hobbies. I mean, the work for me is very fulfilling because of the impact that I'm making. Um, I will share that I love to knit. I love to make jewelry. And the thing is that the side hustle comes from when somebody sees something, for example, that you make. And this has happened to me before where, Darlene, I really love that necklace. Will you make one for me? And I said, what? Give it to you? Sell it to you? He goes, no, I'll buy it from you. So that's kind of how a side hustle would start, right? It starts as a hobby. People like it. They're actually willing to pay you for it. So it's like, okay, figure out what you're worth. And I wouldn't say make it your full-time gig, but the thing is that it's okay to nurture it, making sure you have a full-time job, right? And your salary that supports your living and everything else that comes with it. But it's okay to start a side hustle as a hobby that way.
Well, Darlene, thank you for all the great thoughts and advice you had tonight, sharing your experiences. And we definitely hope you stay in contact with our 3 organizations. We look forward to collaborating with you again. For those still on, don't go away as we're finishing up. Let me let you know that we do have our 5th event coming up in a month from now, November 18th, I believe. And I'm just trying to find the slide. And while we're doing that, we're going to break out into a networking session after this for those of you hanging on. They're always a great time of getting to know everybody. The 3 questions I'm going to pose, pick a facilitator. And if you can't think of somebody who naturally wants to facilitate the group, let's say the person who lives the farthest away from San Francisco should be the facilitator of the group. And we're going to talk about your passion project. And then we're going to give an introduction to yourself. We're going to talk about your passions and then how can we help each other. So if you have an ask, whether it's a networking contact or something else, feel free to ask because that's what we're all about. It's empowering each other. Our next session, Wednesday, November 18th, and it's going to be specifically Office Politics, the Asian Professionals Guide with David Lum. David's a director from Motorola out of Singapore. So with that, we will finish up the official program for tonight. I thank you all for being our guest. If you want to check out the Asian Business League or NAP San Francisco or the Asian Leaders Alliance, please go visit our links and they're all here below. So with that, I will stop the live stream. Darlene, thanks again. And Darlene's going to stick around for networking as well. Yes. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you all for having me.